We've not evolved for the world that we've built. We're in danger.
People are getting obese, mental health's getting worse, screen time's going up. They're in autopilot a lot of the time.
Every single decision, every single thing a human being does is because of the way it makes them feel.
Today we have got Arian Samouie, who is a trauma healing and transformation coach.
We've all been brought up being taught to reject aspects of ourselves.
Man up, don't cry.
We are emotional beings that think. We're not thinking beings that feel emotions.
We've got constantly, there must be something wrong with you.
Or if I've not done something to please someone, then I have no worth. I hear a lot of like, oh, everything is love. You just gotta love everything. No, you don't.
So it's amazing to have you with us today. Arian helps people break the unconscious patterns that they get stuck in. So we thought it was a great subject that our listeners can really resonate with. And we're really excited to hear everything that you've got to share. We're going to be talking about what trauma is, what it even means, why it might not even mean what you think it means, the importance of developing self-love. Where to start with that is something like we talk a lot about, but people often think that sounds like this vague concept. So we'd love some practical tips and the one skill that you should learn to start feeling more in control of your actions and your life. So first up though, we are known for cutting the BS. And I know when people hear terms like self-love and trauma, then they can think, well, actually that sounds a bit woo-woo. So I'd love to hear, like, what's the science behind your approach and where does it even originate from?
Well, I think what would be a really good start is to just kind of explain what trauma really is. Trauma is a very normal thing, but in society, we've put this kind of like shameful spin on it to suggest that if someone's gone through trauma, it means that there's something wrong with them. There's something not right, working correctly. Our upbringing also makes us believe this about ourselves, but trauma itself is a very, very, very normal thing that happens to a human being. It's how we protect ourselves emotionally, and we are emotional beings. So in a moment where we would have emotional distress, without being able to resolve that emotional distress, we react in a certain way. Now, the way that we react, that is what falls in the definition of trauma. So if we were to try to define trauma, we would say emotional distress without resolution. Now, this can happen. It's not only like the big things like car crashes or sexual abuse or if a family member dies. This happens when you're scolded as a child. This happens when you have an unmet need that you're not even aware of yourself, trying to get that met, and that doesn't get met, and the people around you don't understand what's happening. So in that moment, it would fall in the category definition of trauma. So it's about understanding that trauma is a very, very normal thing for a human being to go through. In terms of what happens in that moment, it's more to do with understanding the human being. I'm a human being, but I am not the human being. I'm the conscious driver driving the human being, and this human being is a continuous feedback machine. Whatever happens to you, it's feeding back information. So what I feel is a feedback. My emotions are a feedback. So it's the science behind it isn't necessary. It's not necessarily like, right, I'm going to get into the biology of it. It's more, I would suggest, to keep it kind of light, is to go towards understanding that it's a feedback and my emotions are taking me to certain places to understand why I feel the way I do, because my feelings are always a feedback.
Yeah, I think that's a really important kind of approach that I've always tried to use with clients is there's no bad emotions. They're all useful, trying to tell you something. And it's when we've been conditioned to think, oh, fear is bad or shame is bad. That's when it goes down that spiral of trying to hide it or avoid it or distract it. So that's a really great explanation. Thank you.
I read a while ago, basically, if you've had a childhood, you've gone through trauma. So basically we all have versus, I don't think most people would say like, oh, I've had a traumatic life, but it's just varying degrees.
Yeah, well, this is again, it goes back to what does that mean in society? What does it mean when someone says, I've had a traumatic life? If society believe that trauma is this bad thing, then that only falls in the definition of traumatic life. So if you say to someone, I've not had a traumatic life, it's like, well, you experienced trauma. So
Yeah.
you have, but not in the definition that you would say that you've had. And this is one of my main goals, is to change the narrative of what trauma means. It's so normal for a human being to experience trauma. Would
you say it's necessary? Like it's a necessary part of
it is. It's how we protect ourselves. And you said like there's no good or bad emotions, and I wholeheartedly agree. If you define anything as bad, well, you can't. Like you said, fear. Fear is undesirable to feel, but it's not bad. If a car was coming at you 90 miles an hour, fear would make you jump out of the way and save your life. So therefore, it's good. It's necessary. Fear has saved your life, your entire life. So it's not bad. Yes, we don't want to feel it. So I always define them as desirable or undesirable emotions. But then again, it's that feedback. If a car's coming in at 90 miles an hour, the feedback is, we're in danger. We need to move. We need to jump. And sometimes the unconscious parts of you take over and you jump out of the way. But it's all a feedback. Everything within your human being, everything in your reality is a feedback to how you are about the self, how you're feeling, what's going on within the self. And if you learn how to understand that feedback, your life will change forever.
You have a really great quote on your website, actually, which is, to know how you work as a human being is the most valuable thing you can ever learn. And that ties into what you just said, really.
Yeah, it's your experience of reality is all happening within you. My experience of reality isn't happening with you or with you. It's completely happening with me. And if I don't understand how this human being system works, then it's like I've not got my hands on the steering wheel. It's just, you know those like bumper cars. It's like you're in the bumper cars and your hands off the wheel and you're just hitting things and just your foot's on the gas. To understand how you work as an emotional being, how to understand the feedback of every emotion, of how you feel, what you think. To understand all of that is you putting your hands on the wheel. And this is where triggers come in. This is where thoughts come in, what your emotions are, how to understand this. So this is why I concentrate mainly on teaching people how they work.
It's a skill, isn't it? Just like anything else, but it's one that's not taught very well.
Oh, it's not taught at all.
Yeah, like at all. Maybe parents will pass on some skills that they've learned to help deal with some of their emotions. But often, sometimes, instead of passing on helpful skills, it can actually be quite the opposite, where you just kind of imitate how they reacted, and can just keep ending up in that same sort of cycle and loop.
Well, it's actually one of the ways that we keep ourselves safe. So the conditioning through parents is something that we always recognize in ourselves, but then we always beat ourselves up for doing that. So, for example, if a parent of mine, let's say if I had an empty cup on the table and my mother, who was very strict, came downstairs and always told me off for putting an empty cup on the table. Go put it in the kitchen. That needs to be in the kitchen. It's like, oh, okay. And then I forgot again. We all, we make mistakes. Humans aren't perfect. So then we forgot the next day. Next day, she scolded me. She told me off. In that moment, I'm experiencing emotional distress. And because my caregiver doesn't understand what's going on, because they never got taught, society have never been taught, no one in my life understands what's going on. So that distress now is unresolved. There's no resolution for it. That's the moment where it falls into trauma. So what happens is a part of myself learns to keep me safe by doing the same thing that's been done onto me. So my parent, my caregiver will go put that in the kitchen, go put that in the kitchen. So now parts of myself, whenever I put an empty cup there, will go put that in the kitchen, go put that in the kitchen. And that's now my self-talk. It's a part of me. So that's what happened to my parent, to my caregiver with her mother. And that's what happened to her mother and her mother. And it's that conditioning passed down.
Mm-hmm.
So there is the conditioning biologically trauma, but there's also conditioning through behavioral trauma as well, where it's the same type of scolding, the same type of telling the children off, because it's all just the wounds. And now I have that same wound. I have this fear of the empty cup being on the table. And when I have a child and they leave an empty cup, it then triggers my fear, which then makes me tell them, go put it in there, because by them putting it in the kitchen, it calms my fear down.
Yeah. And you see that. You definitely see that, like with so many people, where it's kind of passed on until that person decides to deal with it. Which is becoming much more of an open conversation, and people are wanting to develop those skills either through going to counselling or just becoming more self-aware. Is there anything that you advise for people? Because it's a big step to take. You know what I mean? Like, first you've got to admit there's a problem, which people don't want to do. Then you've got to step into that problem and really be open to exploring the pain that you're going to go through to get to the other side.
Yeah, my biggest advice is always, and this is why we go back to learning how you work, is because it's not a problem. It's a wound. If I fall out of a tree and break my legs, no one's going to come up to me and go, oh, God, you can't walk. They're going to understand, like, oh, you can't walk because you have wounded legs.
Yeah.
So it's to understand that it's a wound. These are wounds. There's nothing wrong with you. Your entire life, you have been programmed to believe that there's something wrong with you through your wounds. So when you start seeing it as a wound that I can heal, that I can resolve, that I can reintegrate, then there's a lot less shame towards admitting that there's something here that I need to look at. There's something within myself that needs my attention. But it's nothing that anyone can force anyone else to do. Like, I can't heal you or something. It's something that I teach people how to heal. So it's something that the individual needs to want to do themselves.
Why is there so much shame from it? Because that's, like, I started going to counselling last year, and it was probably one of the best things that I've done in terms of developing those skills around self-awareness and knowing yourself more. And I've been quite open talking about it with friends or family, and my girlfriend's always gone, I'm proud that you just openly say about that, because there is still a stigma or a shame around saying that you've gone and got therapy or you've got counseling. Like, there must be something wrong with you. And I quickly, when I got there after a couple of sessions, just realized, I was like, oh, this is like a skill. This is like me learning sales. This is like me learning copywriting. This is a skill in me learning more about myself. I'm like, oh, that's useful. Oh, that's not. Okay, if that's not so useful, can I maybe like recognize that a little bit earlier next time? Can I do something about it? Can I look to change that pattern and thought behavior? And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. So for me, I kind of just like removed the emotion. I was like, oh, this is just a skill that's helping me live a healthier, happier life. But there is a lot of shame around it. Like, even when you suggest to other people about going to counseling, it can almost come across offensive sometimes.
No, that's a great question. The shame comes from society, but society's programming about the shame has been installed in individual households based on their upbringing. We all get triggered of our own wounds, even if we see others doing the thing. So, for example, I just use the example of a child would leave an empty glass or an empty cup on the table, and the caregiver's wounds of the same thing got triggered, which they would then force the child to do what needs to be done in order for their wounds to calm down. We've all been brought up being taught to reject aspects of ourselves, the angry part of ourselves, the parts of ourselves that cry, that are sad, the parts of ourselves that don't want to do certain type of businesses, they want to be creative. We've learned that all these parts of myself are not acceptable, because whenever I am these parts of myself, I'm rejected by the people around me. I'm told that I'm not good enough. I'm told that I can't do it. I'm told that I don't need to be who I am. So, and a lot of that is been communicated to me through shame. And because everyone is conditioned like this, everyone has these types of beliefs. So we're bringing up children, bringing up humans with the belief and the teachings that there are parts of yourself that you cannot be. You need to completely deny these parts of yourself, reject them. Otherwise, you will not be accepted. So when we talk about therapy and when we talk about mental health and healing, what an individual hears is you need to go towards these parts of yourself that you've learned are the reason why you have been pushed away, rejected. And then you start feeling the wounds. And that's why, no, I'm not going towards these parts of myself. I don't need therapy. I don't need this. I don't need that. But then if I tell someone I'm going to therapy, again, the same thing's happening. Their wounds are being triggered based on what I'm doing, just like the mother and the child and the cop. So when I speak to someone and say, hey, I'm going to therapy, then they're being triggered to like say, hey, you need to go towards these parts of yourself. And they're like, no, that's bad. So, and it's obviously depending on, we bring up the society of males in a specific way and the society of females in a specific way. So there are differentiations of, men do reject the emotional side of themselves more because they're expected to be a certain type of human being. To be a man is to reject and not cry and not be emotional.
To man up, don't cry. Like, that's definitely how I was raised by my dad, at least. You know what I mean? It was just like, what are you crying for? Like, stop your moaning. That's not what men do. And it's like, that is a very typical way of at least. I mean, it's starting to change, definitely, in a lot of ways. And then there's a balance, isn't there? Like, of, you wouldn't want to just let your emotions completely control all your behavior because you'd just be running wild to an extent. Like, there's a level of wanting to have a little bit of control over your emotions at certain times, or at least when
Yeah, no, that's an interesting one. And I don't disagree. But I have to reword it differently. And that's because of the message I get. Your emotions are completely 100% of communication. And we've been led to believe that we can control them. And we can't. No one can control any emotion at all, ever. No human being can. What we can do is we can control our behavior by suppressing that emotion. And there are definitely times where you don't, if you're in a certain circumstance, you don't want to kind of, if your emotions take over in that moment, there might be danger in other ways, or,
I'd say it's easier to do when you're at peace with yourself. So like, from my example, it would be, and I think I have had road rage twice in my life. Never am ever proud of those situations, but one of the times was like a couple of years ago, and like typically, like, I could have someone cut me up, I could have someone give me the finger, I could have someone do the worst things. I just laugh. I'm just like, they must be having a bad day. That's kind of how it is. And it's like, and it's exactly that. Like, when you're at peace with yourself and you're in a good place, like, someone can trigger an emotion for you and you're able to just be okay with it. But when you're in a maybe heightened state of multiple different emotions and somebody triggers you, it seems so much easier to just tip over and let those emotions maybe, take over your behaviors and create maybe a more negative outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially like if there's the possibility of confrontation, like I said, you could probably have other outcomes where you probably might get into a fight that you really, really don't want to and everything. But I would, I completely agree. It's sometimes the messages I give out there, it can be not confusing, but obviously some people are like, well, what about this scenario? What about this scenario? It's like, yeah, absolutely.
Of course. Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm not saying go fight everyone, be in the anger and punch people in the face. No, that's not what I'm saying.
I think something that I found really interesting, because I've got a toddler at the moment and there's a lot of emotions, is allowing him to have them, but finding ways to let them out in a way that is acceptable to society, but also feels like he's able to express himself. So if he's upset, he can be upset, but you just maybe don't need to scream, like, let's just have a hug. So that's what I've been trying to work on, to try and break some of those patterns. Because something that I heard which really hit a note on me is when you feel like you most want to snap at your kids is because they're doing something that your mum shouted at you for, or your dad shouted at you for. And that's why you have such a visceral reaction. And I catch myself and I want to be like, shut up. And I'm like, no, give him a hug, give him a hug. But it's having that awareness to break the cycle, isn't it? Yeah. And showing him there is another way to deal with what you're feeling right now.
Yeah. And doing that as well is actually extremely healing for you. Mm-hmm. One of the biggest healing part of my journey is the fact that I do have a son, and the way that I treat him is massively healing for these parts of myself. But yeah, it's 100% correct. It's every single decision, every single thing a human being does is because of the way it makes them feel. Everything, your desire to exceed in career, your desire to have a family, everything is because of the way it makes you feel. Even my family is safe. So when they're safe, I feel peace. When they're not safe, I feel fear. So as much as I love them, I still want them to be safe because it makes me feel peace. It makes me feel love. It makes me feel peace. So in the moments where a child will be doing that and it triggers you, your desire to say, shut up.
We all know what you're about to say then.
is because of, I need to change the way I feel. My desire, and this is not just you, this is with every human. If I want that person to change their behavior, it's because that behavior is making me feel like this. Mm-hmm. So if you work on and try and understand that feeling and heal that part, that same person can do the same thing and it will not take you to the same place.
Yeah, I think that's actually been a really big learning, like you said, having your own child and knowing you're doing it for them, but knowing your own reactivity in a different way. Because I was aware of my reactivity before, but didn't really need to do anything about it. Like if I was a bit of a knob to my husband, let me off. Whereas if I'm a bit of a knob to my kid, what am I doing to him? Like, what patterns am I setting for him? It's like a whole nother level of accountability. And so I think it has that personal growth that you maybe weren't expecting as part of the side effects of parenthood, which is kind of cool.
It's huge. It's absolutely monstrous. I cannot tell you how big it is because you're breaking the chains of the generational passed down trauma. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't mean that your caregivers are bad. Any of our caregivers bad. We don't know what we don't know. And our parents, our caregivers, did the best with their knowledge. The absolute best they could, just like we're doing the absolute best we could. But you and I live in a time where I pull a phone out my pocket and I've got the world's information on it.
Yeah,
they didn't have that.
Yeah, it's crazy.
They didn't have that, So it's not, there's never a blame on them, but the changes that you are doing now, 2-3 generations down the line, it's monstrous. I can't, it wouldn't sit right to be like, oh, that's good, because it's not just good, it's phenomenal, because the changes, then your grandchildren and then their children, and it's just a huge shift. And because more people are doing this in society, it's going to grow and spread, and 2-3 generations down the line, society is going to look very, very different to the way it looks now. Mm-hmm. So it's very, very big.
And we always talk about, what are the gifts you can give your kids, because we're talking about exercise, nutrition, in a recent episode. I think this is just now starting to be seen as part of health, and mental health really actually is starting to be considered as important as physical health and emotional resilience. And so I think whereas now it's acceptable to say, well, you're going to teach your kids to eat healthily and you're going to teach them to be active, it is starting to be very much more mainstream to say, we're going to teach them to regulate their emotions. We're going to teach them how to respond to things, which is amazing, like you say, for their benefit and for all the generations to come, that's now normalised.
it's necessary. We are emotional beings that think. We're not thinking beings that feel emotions. So you wouldn't put a human in a car without teaching them how to drive the car. So it's about teaching young human beings how to drive this human being, because that's what we're doing. Our job is to guide children into this world. And, it's like, well, this is how you cook this food. This is how you shower. This is how you bathe. This is what your human being is saying to you. This is what this emotion means. This is what this emotion means. And because we were never taught, that teaching was never passed down. And this is where, again, my kind of like main goal is to teach the world this, so then we can spread out and teach more and teach more.
Do you think that is going to happen? I mean, I'm not trying to be a very much a pessimist here with that. I think there's definitely small pockets of people where you're taking on that education, you're learning those skills, and you're passing them down to your kids. But if you then look at the majority of society, in the Western world at least, people are getting obese, chronically obese, mental health's getting worse, screen time's going up. People they're not even like living, they're in autopilot a lot of the time, whether that's 9 hours a day on your phone, whether that's just reacting constantly in the same way because that's how you should, or, you watch a lot of drama TV shows and, exploding with emotion is like, well, that's what you're supposed to do in that situation. Versus like, I love what we're talking about, and I feel like it's a much like physically and mentally healthier way to go about interacting with yourself and the world. But I do worry sometimes as if like, and it's all we can do is like the message just isn't loud enough and people just aren't learning some of these skills. If anything, it's going vastly possibly the other way.
Yeah. No, it's a very good observation. And I believe, from what I can see, both is happening. We're continuing. We're having more. We're having more children. It's not like humanity has stopped, and the programming is continuing in kind of the old school way of don't feel this, don't feel that, and yes, it is getting worse. But at the same time, there is kind of like this path and this window of humans now learning. Every client that I've had has had a huge change. I speak to more and more people like yourselves who are becoming more aware of this, and it will be something that will improve. I don't believe that we're going to see the biggest change of it globally in our lifetimes, but it is something that is starting. I'm seeing it like happen.
Yeah.
I think it's making it relatable to people, isn't it? Because when you start off with, we're going to talk about trauma, people go, well, that's not me. Yeah. When you then say, there are things that you do as a reaction because that's how your mum reacted to stuff, people can start to be like, oh yeah, I do that. And there are things that you feel that you push away or you suppress with eating or going out clubbing or whatever it is. And people can relate to it. And then that's the kind of way in to say, well, if you don't want to do those things anymore, what's behind it? That's what we need to talk about.
Yeah. And it is a challenge. And, a lot of people do have the idea of certain words do trigger the woo-woo side. Healing in itself. It's like, healing? Oh, God, not this again. But then if I go, I can teach you how to increase your emotional intelligence. Like, oh, yeah, I want to do that.
Oh, you'd have a YouTube channel
right
up there.
You've got to make it, unfortunately, you do have to make it sexy. Like, you got to make trauma sexy, which is not the easiest thing in the world to do, but that's just how people are to an extent. And if the message wants to get through, there's got to be ways of wrapping it up that way. Yeah,
absolutely. You've got to... Because my goal is to teach people. This is another one. I want to teach you how you work. That's very different to I'm going to teach you how to heal. Mm-hmm. But that's what it is. I'm not tricking anyone. I'm teaching you how you work. You are the conscious driver of this human being. You're not your mind. You're not your thoughts. You're not your body. And you're not how you feel. You are the conscious driver in this human being. And we know, like, even through science, when you are feeling an emotion, depending on what emotion it is, you are biologically different. You're vibrating at a different frequency. There are ways that you work. There's a communication. There's this emotion does this. You have your nervous system. You have what your thoughts are. You can detach from thoughts. You can detach from your body and allow your body to feel the emotion and release it. You suppress these parts of yourself. You're multiple personalities. You're not one personality. You're not one thing. You're an ecosystem. These are ways that you work. And if you don't understand these, it's going to be very hard to drive the human being body or system. So it's about learning. And that's what I'm trying to do, teach people. It's not, healing is part of that. Healing is, oh, okay, I understand how I work. And by doing this, because I've become aware of a behavior of mine that gets triggered, the trigger is the communication. So then I'm going to do what needs to be done, healing, which will then get me to a place where my child can completely lose themselves and it won't make me feel that way. That's because I have learned how I work, not because I've healed. It's just healing is part of learning how I work.
It's one of the cool things that I always find when we talk about self-awareness. Part of the healing is just the awareness sometimes, isn't it? As soon as you start to recognize that pattern, it just takes the power away from it almost. Yeah. And even, if somebody's listening to this and thinks this is all like, whoa, deep, like what are they even talking about? Something that I think is really relatable is, when you notice you're maybe mindlessly eating, as soon as you realize, oh, in that situation, when someone says something like that to me, I always just reach for the chocolate. Next time someone says something like that to you, you think, am I going to reach for the chocolate? And the next time you don't reach for the chocolate, it's just the awareness. And so I think that's a good kind of way in the door for people.
It's huge, yeah. I'm actually, my main goal, my main message is to become more self-aware. That's your journeys. That's your, the journey, the path is to raise self-awareness. And some of the parts of yourself, that's all you need. You need that awareness of the pattern. Some other parts require more, requires you to go into the emotion, the suppressed emotion. And then you need to communicate with this part of yourself. And you do that through the state of imagination. You understand what unmet needs this part of yourself has. And because your mind can't tell the difference between the 3D life, the 3D reality world, and imagination, it treats both of them the same. So you can actually meet the unmet needs. And this is where the term of meet your own needs comes from. So I can meet the unmet needs of these parts of myself. So then I can reintegrate this part of myself. So there are different levels based on what part is coming up, what the communication is. Some of them is just the awareness. Some of them is just feeling the emotion and then it's gone. They don't need anything else. And some of them require a little bit more.
Sorry to interrupt, just a quick ask. If you are enjoying this podcast, we do ask if you would go and hit that subscribe button, because our goal is to be able to help all of you guys become body smart. And the way we can do that is by getting better guests on, more experts. And the bigger this podcast gets, the more guests we can get on here.
So if you could give somebody, one skill to start on this journey, what would it be?
To start on the journey. The skill that I would give to start on the journey is to question why. Question why. There are, the reason I do online courses and I do the videos that I do is because it's very hard to give someone really beneficial skill by just one sentence or something. But the closest to that is question why. Why do I feel like this? Mm-hmm. Why do I want to do that? Why do I have this thought? Not to go down the path of it being wrong. It's not wrong, it's a communication. There's no thoughts that you have that are wrong. There are no feelings that you have that are wrong. It's a communication. I may have thoughts that I want to kill someone, or I want to beat someone up or something. And there are a lot of people who go, oh, but that's wrong. It's like, but why do I have that thought? And if I label that as wrong, I'm stopping the communication. Mm-hmm. I could go down the path of, because they wronged me in this sense. And because they wronged me in this sense, I feel anger. And anger is always a cover emotion to fear. And fear is my actual wound. It's my wound of being treated in a way that wasn't just me being unseen. It made me feel like I'm not good enough, and it put me in danger. And now I have this part of myself. I can meet the needs of this part of myself. I wouldn't be able to make that journey if I made that thought wrong.
Yeah.
So question why.
One thing that we always use with our coaches is to get curious. Sometimes that sounds less challenging than why. You know, get curious about what's going on, and just interrogate or ask or explore is sometimes a little bit of a softer entry for people.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that's a fantastic way to go towards it as well.
In terms of like taking action, like I often find that people maybe just aren't willing to go there. Like what we're talking about now is possibly like painful, or like why should I give that attention? And one of the exercises that I've done in the past with clients is like how they can maximize motivation, you know, towards their goals. And the two ways we kind of go about it is we look at like what's all the really positive sides of them achieving their goals. So it might be like dream body, feeling more self-aware, more happy, more body confident, shoulders back, higher self-esteem, whatever that looks like for them, better lives for their families. But then on the flip side, we go on like, what is the cost if you don't achieve your goals? Because we're not at a plateau. We're either moving forwards or we're moving backwards. And it's, you know, chronic health issues, possibly could have a shorter life expectancy, could pass on bad habits and skills to your kids. Yeah. Like, you know, you keep going and we really get into the pain. And now in front of them, they've got, you know, very much like the dream outcome of everything that they could achieve, which sometimes is enough to motivate people, but often not enough. But then it's like all the negatives, and like having both of them very clear, black and white in front of them, makes it almost a great exercise for them to raise the level of necessity to be like, right, going forward is the only option. In terms of the work that you're talking about, what is only the others? What is the dream outcome? And then on the flip side of it, what is the like the negative of people not dealing with some of these unmet needs?
Yeah. The dream outcome would be being happy. Your goal is the more you become self-aware, the more authentic you become yourself, the more authentically you are. And your dream outcome is to find your happiness, internal happiness, not needing anything external from you in order to be happy, to be at peace. And most of the main reason why people wouldn't go towards that, and I love the way that you present that to people, because it shows them like so much clearer, which always helps. And the main reason people don't go towards that is because it requires them to go towards their pain. And that's the whole reason why we're in the place that we are, is because we avoid our pain. It's how we've kept ourselves safe.
We were actually talking about this earlier, weren't we? It's like a very human trait where if everything's okay, we just stay where it is because it's known, it's safe. Like, I know if I don't deviate from this path, nothing bad is going to happen. But actually, okay isn't a great place for a lot of people to be. There's so much more. But getting people to get off the okay train and onto the life's amazing train is so much harder than it really feels it should be. Yeah.
Usually, it's pain that gets people there. It's when things are so bad, there's no other option. That's what it was like for me. So there's 3 times in my life that I was this close from committing suicide. And the 3rd time was about 2.5 years ago when my last relationship ended. And the only reason I didn't is because I have a son. But that is what forced me to go, well, I remember I was like, well, I can't kill myself because I have a son and he needs me. So I need to figure this out. I have to figure out. There's no other option now. Before there were options. They were like, I could just stay here. I could just do this. I could, but I got to that point where I was like, there's no other option. And that's mainly when people start progressing. People start going towards it when there's no other option because the pain is that big. Before that, it's not like that's the only.
I wish it wasn't, because it's a very traumatic experience for anyone to go through to get to to that low point of like, this has to change.
Yeah.
I'm still yet to figure out, I was saying to you, like a framework that you could have for someone where they can say you're in that, you know, comfortable complacence, or just something where it's just like, it's not good enough. You know, you've got these unresolved issues, or you know, life could be better, but doing something about it in that point. And it's, I don't fully understand what that framework needs to look like.
Yeah.
What we just went through there is a way I'll try and raise the levels of necessity for people. But because, yeah, like, getting to that point for anyone, you know, of that level of pain, yes, it often does drive action, but God, wouldn't it be nicer if you didn't have to get there? Yeah.
And it's what I think's bonkers is, even if you're aware of all of this approach, and, you know, we're very self-aware compared to maybe general population, but it took you getting to a really dark place last year to take action. It took me getting to, like, my hair was falling out. I couldn't sleep. I was in such a bad place a couple of years ago before I really went down this route. And yet we're aware, like, all this information's out there. We read about it all the time. We see it all the time. We talk to people about it. And yet it still takes us to get to our bodies saying enough, or our minds saying enough before we do something.
This is the main reason why I concentrate on teaching people how they work. Because me neglecting myself in order to go to work or to make this person happy, or, you know, anything that it is because I'm in unconscious patterns and behaviors, which is what I've learned to do to stay safe. So I will abandon myself by telling people that, yeah, of course I can help you move house, when I can't. I really can't. I don't have the time. I don't have the energy. And it would make life really, really hard. But I'll do it because I'm on an unconscious habit, which I have learned that if someone is upset with me, or if I've not done something to please someone, then I have no worth. This is where I get my value from. This is how I've learned to be accepted, in not just in society, but with my caregivers and my family and my friends. That's an unconscious pattern. And that's one. We have hundreds. There's so many. And then if I'm constantly in these unconscious patterns, and then someone comes up to me and goes, hey, you should really, take care of yourself. What that person is hearing in that moment is, hey, you should go towards your pain. Because if I stop pleasing people, then that's going to take me to my wounds. That's going to trigger my wounds. The way I calm myself down, because everything that I do is of how it makes me feel. I will go and help that person. I will abandon myself to help that person move, even though I can't, because that calms my wounds down.
I think as you're saying that, it even makes sense to say it's taking you towards danger. It's not like wounds might feel quite conceptual to people, but I can imagine me feeling like, no, because then they'll be angry at me. Then they won't be friends with me. Then I'll have no friends. Yeah. Like, it's that deeply rooted need to be accepted and not abandoned by the group, isn't it?
It is. It's actually a very big part of how we work as humans. We're a relationally dependent species. We're herd species, and we're social creatures. Connection is as important for a human being's survival than food and water. So when I am rejected as a human being, I go towards annihilation. You know, an infant on their own would die 100% of the time. So we actually use love, connection, and relationships as a way of surviving. These are wounds that are just continuously being repeated, continuously running in the background. So even as adults, I still have those wounds. So that's why I help my friend move house when I don't really want to. Because if I don't, and then it doesn't matter whether they reject me or not, it's irrelevant. I will feel that wound, because I will go, now they're angry at me because I said no. And they might not be. They'll be like, no, it's completely understandable. But I feel that wound, and that wound takes me to annihilation.
You'll look for it as well. Like, they'll say, oh, no, it's fine. And you're like, but was the tone not okay? Because your brain is looking for that danger, because you know what you did was wrong. Well,
as what you would class as wrong.
Yeah.
But that's, again, it's how we work. You know, if we've not evolved for the world that we've built, we've not evolved for any of this. This is great. These microphones, headphones, cameras, the internet, it's fantastic. Don't get me wrong. I love this. This world that we've built has saved my family and saved me many times. It's fantastic, but we've not evolved for it. What we have evolved for is, let's say I'm walking down a path and on the right, there's this tree with this juicy apple. And I look at the juicy apple and I think, oh, I'm like so excited about this juicy apple. I'm like, yes, this is amazing. And then on the left, I hear rustling in the bushes. And I'm like, whoa, now I'm in survival. So I'm in survival. I don't know what it is. So I start catastrophizing. Well, it might be an animal. And if the animal jumps out at me, I've got my knife. I might turn around like this and use my knife here, or I could walk around here. I start thinking of all the possibilities that there are because I'm in survival. In that moment, I can't be excited about the juicy apple. I just can't, because my mind, my entire being is in survival of this thing. And what we've done is we've created a world that keeps us all in survival.
Well, it's every day, isn't it? It's the wake up and
Bing.
I mean, I don't have any notifications on my phone. It's one of the best things I've done 5 years ago. No phone for the first hour, no notifications. Still probably one of the best things I've done. But most people are waking up straight on the phones, straight on social media, straight on the news. Fear. Yeah. And you're going into your day so reactive and unaware. And it's like you're letting your day run you instead of you run your day.
Yeah.
Which is, like you said, you can't really focus on
the
juicy apple.
No, absolutely. I agree. And you're also, throughout the day, you're concerned about the bills you need to pay at the end of the month. Mm-hmm. You're concerned about the family gathering you've got in 6 weeks. You're concerned about traffic might be too bad and you'll be late. What's my boss going to say? Constantly catastrophizing about the worst case scenarios because you're living in survival mode. You're living in survival mode because of the experiences in your life that have caused you to have emotional distress without any resolution for that distress, which is now part of yourself that are in fear of annihilation, which goes into all of these possibilities, all of these things. So it's about understanding that. How do I get out of survival mode? Well, you give attention to the parts of yourself that are scared, that are concerned. Do the exploration of why they feel like that. Go towards them. And I do the same thing with the phone. Mm-hmm. And it's the best thing.
Yeah, it really is. I literally found, probably when I was about 22, 23, but I'm actually maybe a little bit older than that, and I'd wake up in the morning, and before my eyes had even opened, I'm like looking at my notifications and messages, and I'm like trying to message people back, and I don't think it was till like Steph was just like, she was like, stop that, like you're not even awake. Mm-hmm. And I was like straight away into that urgency of like, oh, I need to get back to these people, I need to do this, and the relief I almost felt after doing it. No notifications. The only one I have on is text message. Mm-hmm. So my family know, if you want to get a hold of me, don't send me a WhatsApp, send me a text message. And that's it. That's that and phone calls. And that has just been like a lot of peace. It's not just pinging all the time and taking my attention and me being very reactive. And then also just like no phone for that first hour. Actually let my mind and body just wake up a little bit. Because it's an amazing tool, the phone. I mean, it's like a mini supercomputer, really. But it also can be with anything that powerful, you have to be careful and wary of what it can do. Yeah,
it's also in the morning is kind of like the gateway into your subconscious. Your brain waves are in a different frequency, and your subconscious is basically your reality. It's who you are. And I used to do the same, fear. And I'm deeply programming your subconscious in that moment in the first hour. I think it's like first 20 minutes to 30 minutes, but I always give it an hour. Mm-hmm. And when I stopped doing that as well, I was the same. And I've done the same as well. Just I realized that if I had woken up an hour later, like these people, they would just hear from me an hour later. Like, you know, so I was like, what am I doing? I could just be like, no, it's okay. I woke up an hour later. Don't worry about it. And that hour, I'm just awake doing myself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think that's a really interesting like segue though, because a lot of people have jobs where they are expected to respond within a certain time or be online at a certain time. And then that just gets transferred across, doesn't it? You start building that expectation of yourself. So I actually find this really ridiculous of myself because we've worked together for a long time and in different time zones. And like I'd be asleep and Jaymie would be awake or whatever. The minute I open my computer, I must check Jamie's messages. I still do it every day. Really like get back to him real quick. But I'm like, he doesn't care if I start at 8 or 9 or 10. Like, you know, I'm going to do my job.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I have this wound of like, don't want Jaymie to think I'm Skyping off. So now you know.
Yeah, now I do know. Yeah. I mean, I'm glad that you said that. I don't put any pressure for that to be the case.
No.
Yeah.
But what is ridiculous is literally for 3 years when we first started working together, you weren't even awake.
Well, yeah, because you were 7 hours ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Wild. Yeah.
Yeah. So in summary, like we've talked a lot about some conceptual things that people can actually maybe resonate with in their day-to-day lives. But do you think there's anything that every person could take from today's chat and just start to make that one step towards finding those wounds, taking a bit more self-love, finding a better way forwards?
Yeah, I think I always default back to having the desire to understand how you work. You know, you are in this human being, whether you want to say you're the human being or not. Without knowing how you work, you're living in reactive mode. So you're not actually living as you. You've learned that you're not allowed to be you. You've learned that you have to be a different version of yourself in order to be accepted. So it's just learning how to be you and learning how you work. That's kind of like my main message to everyone, because we're all human. There are ways that we work. For example, if you and I or yourself went for heart surgery, there would be things that would be standard. There would be blood transfusion. You know, the surface area needs to be sterilized. There's so many things that are standard because we all work that way. And it's the same thing. It's about learning how you work. Otherwise, you're not even living, you're just alive. And it's the only reason we do anything is for how we feel. And we're always looking for that, for our happiness or our peace externally from us when it's all just here. So it's about going towards learning how that works to be able to get to where you want to get to.
Yeah, I had a really personal journey with that, which was first, it was to hit this milestone in business. And I was like, that's the thing. And it was probably I was driven there by maybe significance or to be enough. And then I hit that thing, had a beer, felt nothing, felt empty. It was still just as hard, thought it would just get easier. Didn't. And I was like, okay, next day. So comes to the end of the year, I'm like, right, I'm going to set a mantra for the year. Enjoy the process. 6 months into the year, fuck the process. I'm just like, this is hard. I don't enjoy today. And then, going down more steps of self-awareness, it changed to just being at peace. Being at peace with the good days, being at peace with the bad days. And I could get to the end of the day and I could, speak with Steph and it's maybe 10 o'clock at night. It's been a horrible day. And I'm just like, that was a shit. But I can just laugh it off and be like, there's a part of it. You know what I mean? It's not every day is great. Not every day is good. Not every day is bad either. That was just one of those more difficult days. But I'm at peace with it. And that was a huge shift for me, because it went from chasing something which was a societal standard, then chasing a mantra that I thought I should just enjoy it all when I was like, this kind of sucks and I'm not enjoying it, but I'm meant to be enjoying it. So I was always at a deficit. Then going to being at peace. And that for me has been a huge shift. I'm at peace with the good, the bad, the in-between, the ugly, the happy. And I'm okay with it. And that's for me, at least personally, has been a real big shift.
Yeah, no, that's huge. You went to authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
You went to, I feel whatever I feel. Like if it's bad, it's bad. If it's good, it's good.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like the power. That's the strength to be authentic. This is why I say like how you feel is correct every single time. It's a communication. If I feel bad and I'm telling myself I should feel good, then I'm going against how I'm feeling. But then when you got to the place where you were like, doesn't matter. Yeah, today's a bad day. And I'm okay with feeling bad because it was a bad day. And that actually is what's taking you towards enjoying the process, because I'm not beating my
ironically as well. Yeah.
And I promise you, if there's one thing anyone takes away from this is if you can get into the habit, and this is why my main message on social media, like I'll put at least one story up on Instagram a week of saying how you feel is correct 100% of the time, every single time, is to put people in the frame of just never making how they feel wrong. So if I've had a bad day at work, it's okay to feel bad. And that's authenticity. Authenticity is to just be okay with how you feel. It doesn't mean you have to stay in it. And I'm not saying you should enjoy feeling bad. Do the exploration, understand why. If a trigger comes up, get it. Like learn how you work. But once you get to a place of just being completely okay with how you feel no matter what.
Do you think it's like an unrealistic expectation? Like I had an unrealistic expectation of I should enjoy every day of this process. And I think I heard Simon Sinek talk about this, that, you know, we have physical fitness that if we go to the gym some days, strength isn't there, or we just kind of accept it, like, oh, today wasn't my best day, but, you know, showed up. It is what it is. We have that sort of, but we don't tend to have that like mental fitness. Like sometimes people have that expectation of like, well, I shouldn't feel bad today. It's bad that I feel bad today, instead of being like, it's just a bad day. Yeah, it's how I feel. But like there's an expectation of like, I should never feel bad. I should never feel anxious. I should never feel fear. I should never feel any of these sort of other emotions. I should just feel good and happy all the time, which is just not.
It's unrealistic, like you said. If the words "I should never feel," you're already in a place that is not in this reality, because your feelings are a communication. So if anyone ever says "I should" or "shouldn't," and the word "feel," it's like you're already looking somewhere that doesn't exist. On the flip side as well, there's contrast in reality, in life. No one will desire anything without contrast. No one will desire being wealthy if they hadn't felt what it's like to be poor. No one will desire a fantastic relationship if they hadn't been in a bad relationship. If someone was continuously wealthy, they would probably want to continue that wealth to do something else, but their desire would be, it could be from being accepted.
Yeah.
So
it's different. It's like it's very like the rags to riches, isn't it? And the underdog is the one who's chasing versus the person who's maybe there and tends to have more hunger for that desire to achieve that.
Exactly. And without contrast, there would be no desire. So if I reject feeling bad or not feeling good enough or something like that, then it doesn't make sense where I'm going towards, because that's what created this desire. So it's not really something, it doesn't make sense to reject it because it exists and it's in this reality, and we need to start living in our own reality to the wholeness, which is what authenticity is. To be the most authentic you requires you to feel the way you do every time. And if you can take it further, understand it.
I think that's really interesting, though, because a lot of clients come to us with a lot of self-hate, really, don't they? And they say, oh, I shouldn't be like this, or I shouldn't feel like this, or I shouldn't weigh this much. And they do act from a place of self-loathing, not from self-love. And making that jump to self-love feels so huge. They're like, self what? I don't think so. That's never going to be me. But the way you've just described it is more acceptance, isn't it? It's not self-love in what we think is, you know, like looking in the mirror and telling yourself you're beautiful.
Oh, I hate that. I hate that. I coach people, I work with clients, and one of the things I hate the most is when people are told to just look in the mirror and tell themselves you love themselves. It's the most unrealistic, invalidating thing ever.
Yeah.
To kind of simplify it in the simplest term, not easy, simple. To simplify it, all your pain comes from invalidation. Invalidation from the reality of these parts of yourself that you've learned to reject, that you have learned to reject, that you've learned to hate. When I have self-hate, is because I have learned to hate parts of myself. It's in my programming. Human beings are like blank canvases when we're born, and when we grow up, we're programmed. And so if anyone has self-hate, it's a learnt behavior. So if someone is hating themselves, and that is how they've stayed safe, because every time they haven't hated themselves, the people around them have shamed them, have pushed them away, have rejected them. So they've had to learn to conform to the standard, which is what normal, the definition of normal is to conform to a standard. So I'm going to act normal of what everyone's doing around me, which is rejecting all these parts of myself and hating myself. And then they're being told to just go in front of the mirror and tell themselves that you love yourself. And that is so invalidating to all of these parts of themselves that have learnt to keep themselves safe by rejecting and hating themselves. So then people go stand in front of the mirror, and some people can't do it. And the ones that can go, this doesn't feel right. No wonder it doesn't feel right. Yeah. Of course it doesn't feel right. Like, you shouldn't have to do that. You can't get like into a better place by doing the same thing that you've been doing, which is rejecting these parts of yourself and invalidating these parts of yourself. And it's one of the worst things ever. So you don't need to do that. And what I always tell people is find what feels right. You don't even need to look in the front of the mirror. If you can, great. Stand in front of the mirror. Don't tell yourself you love yourself, but find what feels right. So, okay, I love all right, that doesn't feel right. I like myself. No, that doesn't feel right either. All right. I'm a good parent. Oh, that starts to feel right. Yeah, okay. That's what I'm starting with. I'm a good parent. So I'm going to look in the mirror. I'm a good parent. And I'm a good cook. Oh, that feels right as well. Okay, I'm a good cook. Everyone has a different level. Find your level. Find what feels right. Work up from there.
That sounds a lot more practical, real, achievable than, I'm for body positivity, but not on that unrealistic side of things, which is where it tends to come from. Because I feel like when we speak to some of the clients or the women that we've worked with, they're just like that. It just feels so far from their reality that they can't even accept it. But yet the media and social media is telling them that they should just be able to accept it. And it's just unrealistic.
Yeah. Well, there's that word again, should. And it's true. Yeah. It's so true. Honestly, there is so much misinformation out there. And a lot of, even in the spiritual community, you hear a lot of like, oh, everything is love. You just got to love everything. It's like, no, you don't. Like, you don't, if you hate someone, you hate someone. You don't have to reject the part of you that hates someone in order to should love and stuff. It's about understanding yourself, understanding why these parts of you feel like that. And the self-help community and the spirituality community, honestly, they put so much kind of like bypassing techniques out. And this is where like you get the fake positive vibes only. It's like, no, like, this is not you accepting yourself. This is rejecting the parts of myself that aren't positive.
Yeah, and actually in that sense, it's no better than any other distraction then, is it? It's no different to just going and stuffing your face with chocolate or drinking a whole bottle of wine. Yeah, there's so many different forms of coping. And sometimes coping is necessary in the moment. Coping is going the exact opposite direction to where you want to go to. I want to go towards these parts of myself to be able to reintegrate them, to be able to bring them in, which is actually what self-love is. So healing is accepting that you feel a certain way and bringing that part of yourself in. If I bring a part of myself in, then I take that part of self on. And if I'm taking something on as a part of myself, that's what love is.
This is why we see our children and we see them as a part of ourselves. I mean, they are us. That's love. So I can't make a decision that will hurt that child, because then it hurts me, because I've taken that child on as a part of myself. So these parts of myself are the same. Once I take a part of myself on, then I'll stop making decisions that hurt that part of myself. Mm-hmm. So then I'll stop abandoning myself. And when my friend tells me can you help me move house? I'll be like, sorry, I can't. I just don't have the time. I'm really busy.
It becomes easier to have those boundaries then, doesn't it? Because you know what you're actually working to protect. Yeah,
it does. And, it doesn't mean it's an easy journey. It can be a very challenging journey. But you're learning how to have respect for yourself. You're learning how to be there for yourself, how to not abandon yourself anymore. And, that's how you do it. And it's definitely scary at first. When I started saying no to people, I was like, no.
Yeah.
And I was like, what are they going to say?
We still cool.
No, it's okay. Oh my God, they're fine. They're okay. Like, oh, this is great. And you do. And some people might not. Some people might get triggered and go, oh, why not? It's like,
but that's more of a reflection on them, not you.
Oh, absolutely.
But it's being aware of that as well, isn't it?
That really helps, being aware of that. It's what's helped me most, mainly through social media and everything, that I'm just being aware of all the comments and everything that comes. Just like, that's their pain. That really, really helps.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is a challenging journey, but it's one that is necessary for everyone. Absolutely.
It has been absolutely fascinating chatting today, Arian. And I know that we've probably piqued a lot of people's interest into more depth of what you do. So where can people go to find out more about your work?
I have a website, ariansamouie.com. I'm on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. I put a lot of content on all of these platforms to try and help as many people as possible. I think probably those are the best places.
Is that your name, the handle?
Yes.
And how do you spell that for anyone listening?
It's Arian for Norman and Samouie.
We'll put it in the notes as well.
Yeah. And everything has my name as the handle.
Amazing.
Nice and simple. Yeah, thank you so much for coming down.
Thank you. So it's been fantastic being here. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolute pleasure.
If you've been listening to the Body Smart podcast, you will know we are passionate about helping women not just lose weight, but have the knowledge, skills, and habits to make sure that they can keep that weight off for the rest of their lives. So if you are interested in finding out more about our one-to-one coaching, go over and click the link in the bio.